I'm gonna make a winged bowl, and I'm gonna make one out of this. This is an Australian Mallee Burl. This stuff is super dense, super hard. I'm gonna be at the grinder like every 30 seconds. I'm gonna find a circle in this area and the wings will be out here. I think I'll get some cool like natural cavities with this hole here. It'll be fun. I'll be turning quite a bit of air and we'll see where it goes. I'm gonna take my circle finder, go over to the bench, find some circles, and then we'll chuck her up. So I start with the outside of the burl. It's kind of crazy seeing it on video. It looks like I'm not even cutting anything, like the gouge isn't even touching anything. It kind of lines up perfectly with the frame rate. I'm getting lots of bouncing. I'm just trying to settle in and find a groove, see what this burl, how it wants to be cut without just totally kicking me in the rear. Sometimes it felt better to go from the inside towards the outside. Sometimes it felt better to go the other way. I just tried to work, see what would work. If I found a rhythm, try and go with it. And if it started fighting back, try something else until eventually I pared everything down. First thing I'm focusing on is setting the tenon up and the tenon diameter so I can chuck it up after I start getting this all set up. And this part was pretty easy because it's mostly round here. I'm not turning a lot of air. Trying some shear scraping here and there, and I found that if I wasn't getting a straight cut, that would help me clean it up and make it a little bit more accurate. Not sponsored by 3M. Trying to focus on not going too deep before I really start working the outside wings. I find that if I'm taking too much meat off the center and where the wings connect is getting thin, I can start getting some wobbling. Don't want to do that. That just makes getting a straight cut impossible. Detail spindle gouge to set the dovetail. It makes the job super easy. All right, got the dovetail set. Now I know that's all good. That kind of sets the shape of everything else. So now I'm coming out back to the outsides. I want to start focusing on getting those wings up so I can start to get a bowl shape. The frame rate's kind of crazy here. I'm going at about 500 RPM in low gear. Sometimes the frame rate's kind of crazy and it looks like I'm going slow, but it's going pretty fast. Definitely fast enough to cut confidently. Oh, so here I swapped out to my bottom feeder bowl gouge. It's like a 75-degree bevel on that thing. Wanted to see if it could make life a little bit easier. It wasn't, so I went back to my standard bowl gouge. Starting to finally get some meat off there, kind of paring it down. It's starting to work with me. I'm starting to figure out the method that really is gonna work. And really what it was is I'm putting as much gravity as I can down on the tool rest, and I'm just trying to pivot on my hips to make sure I'm not adjusting the bevel angle and trying to make as straight as cut as possible. I'm feeling pretty confident about the depth of the wings now, so now I'm coming in and I just want to set the bowl angle. I'm not breaking any grounds with the shape of the bowl. I just want something that looks nice because really the star of the show is going to be the wings. All right, doing a pull cut again. And this really helped me get the final shape and get it a lot straighter without having to get beat up. And it just worked overall way better. One thing that I'm cutting out of the video here is I'm pausing the lathe a lot, and I'm like checking it out, seeing how everything looks, eyeing it, touching it, feel it. All right, coming in and taking the tailstock nub off. I didn't necessarily need the tailstock for the whole thing since it's mounted to a giant faceplate, but with something crazy like this, I wanted to keep it, you know, pretty on there. All right, getting her chucked up, taking her off the headstock. She was on there. All right, now we've got these cavities here on the side. I really think this is going to be super interesting. Once we get in there, I think we're going to see some cool like shadows and cracks and valleys and stuff like that. All right, I'm doing the easy part first, right in the center. You can kind of see where I marked out in pencil where I wanted the lip of the bowl basically to be. Had to make some adjustments on the tool rest height to find what just really felt right and what really made the cut start to sing. You can see I got a stall there. You know, sometimes I'd come in and I'd be a little bit too aggressive, not even knowing, because it was really hard because there's such little material on the outside that seeing that ghost shape as it comes swinging by was actually really hard to see. I tried putting up some other lights and trying making things a little bit different, and it was just a struggle. I think at the end of the day, such little material on the end, you just really have to focus and really make very delicate cuts to find out where it starts and not try and go too deep. Starting to make some progress here, checking it out, taking a look. I brought out my smaller bowl gouge for a little bit finer of a cut. I found that stepping down and using the smaller tool made it a little bit easier for me to do some of my finish cuts here. Try and get that size down, because I want to start bringing the sides down and making them as thin as possible, you know, to show off. I want to show off as much as I can with this thing. It's a show off piece to begin with. Trying to pull cut again. And honestly, you know, if next time I do a Mallee Burl, I'm going to use the pull cut probably a lot more. It was way easier for cleaning up and for getting the shape where I want it to be while getting rid of like the ridges and the tool marks and stuff like that. And since it's a burl and since this stuff is so dense, I could kind of be aggressive and the surface finish was really nice. It's really forgiving. So the cons are it's crazy hard, and so your tools are dulling, but then the pros are it's actually really easy to get a nice surface finish on it because it's so dense. You're not getting crazy tear out like a soft spalted maple or anything like that. All right, marking my line here again to set where I want the lip of the bowl to be on the top of the winged bowl. So I brought out the bottom feeder bowl gouge here, that 70-degree bevel, and it shined. It really shined here. It's fighting me a little bit. It's just all those little like voids made it for interesting turning the interior. But once I get kind of the hump in the center out, it became a lot easier. Trying to slowly feed on, get to the bottom, make a nice contour on the inside of the bowl. Everything's kind of singing now. Everything's kind of falling into place and getting a lot easier. You can see I'm getting a lot less fight, a lot less pushback. So probably about here is where I should have stopped. But I kept going. I kept on trying to get a better shape, a deeper cut, a better surface finish. And you can see my calipers right at the top there. And I should have been using them, because what you'll see in a little bit is the result of me going a little bit too deep. I was finding the bottom feeder bowl gouge with that aggressive bevel was making it a little bit harder for me to get the right shape I wanted. So I pulled out the smaller bowl gouge, still wasn't super happy. So I pulled out my scraper. This is actually just a big old 1-inch skew, but it worked awesome for really getting the shape together. And it is a shear scrape, but even so, since the wood is so dense, you're not getting bad surface finish. It was pretty nice. Again, I just want to reiterate, it looks like I'm changing the speed, but I rarely touch the dial. And if I was changing the speed, it was maybe 50 RPM here and there if I started to get like a little bit of a shake. But the video and the way the frame rate and everything's catching up with it, it just looks like I'm going from like 1,000 to 200. Again, going too deep. Finishing the shapes out, making sure the contours are kind of nice. I kept on turning off the lathe and checking and turning off the lathe and checking. You can actually see right there some of the surface finish that's not dusty. It's almost polished, and I haven't touched it with sandpaper or anything yet. Speaking of sandpaper, it's fun to watch the video as you can see it skipping forward and you can see the finish start to shine every time I change the pads out. I'm basically doing 120, 240, 320, 400. So I'm just using a standard net mesh style sandpaper, whatever you want to call it. I'm starting at a 120 grit and I'm just working my way up to 400. There is some tool marking that I'm sanding out here. There's a little bit you can kind of see towards the edge of the wings. It was the hardest place to cut, so there's definitely tool marks up there that I'm trying to get rid of. All right, there's the 400, and now just blowing out all the extra dust out of all the little holes and stuff. I'm measuring to see the depth. I'm just using a straight edge at the lowest point of the bowl, and right here, you can see me trying to take as many measurements as possible and realizing I went too deep. So this is my tenon removing tool, just a big plate with some drawer liner in it. I'm measuring the circle and trying to find a circle that I've drawn in here that's going to match up. Now, normally I use this tool to remove my tenons. I like taking the tenons off of the bottom of my bowls, but I can't take the tenon off completely off this bowl. I went too deep. If I removed the tenon off, I'd have a big hole in the bottom. So I'm just going to try and make the tenon look a little bit better. It didn't look bad per se, but I'm going to try and make it a little bit nicer, a little bit smaller, clean it up a little bit, and shave a little bit of the thickness off of it, the depth and the diameter. And I'm just being really careful to make sure I'm not going too deep and then ending up with a hole at the bottom of this. It'd be devastating. One thing you probably can't see is there's a hole, a natural formed hole in the bottom of the bowl that I can actually look at, and I can see the thickness because it's right in the bottom, so I can see how much material I have left. I didn't even really need to measure at this point. I would just stop the lathe, I'd look at the hole, see how much material I got left, and make sure I didn't go too deep. All right, I'm happy with how the tenon looks. It's not exactly what I wanted, but it doesn't look bad. I think it looks good. All right, sanding is done. Let's throw some oil on this thing. I'm just using a standard butcher block oil. It leaves a nice matte finish when it dries, and I think it really brings out all the vibrant, like bird's eyes and veins and the cracks. I just think it really makes this whole thing pop. this was a really fun project. And I love doing things that are interesting and different. If you want to see something else that's a little bit different, check out my burned bowl video where I burnt the entire outside of a bowl with a very tiny ballpoint burner. Hit the like and subscribe button. It really makes a difference. Thanks for hanging around, and we'll see you on the next one.